так вот нас встречают с вертолетами.
65 miles, sir.
Требуют бросить якорь.
This is Estonian warship Papa 6732. Your request will be denied.
वो हमारे जस्ट ऊपर अभी सामने से हमारे ऊपर आ रहा है एयरक्राफ्ट है हाँ ड्रोन जैसा ही है ये
Ну да, с разгоном.
The Baltic Sea, where security and geopolitical tensions are never absent, has once again made headlines around the world. This time, the events revolve around the mysterious tanker Jaguar, also known as Russia's Shadow Fleet, Su-35 fighter jets, and the Estonian Navy and NATO air forces that responded to them. The Russian Navy also responded by dispatching Su-35S fighter jets. The situation escalated further when Polish Air Force MiG-29s took off. Thus, a critical crisis erupted in the Gulf of Finland in a short time. The onboard communications of the crew of the Jaguar tanker belonging to the Russian Shadow Fleet, Estonian Coast Guard warnings, Polish pilots' radio recordings, and the maneuvers of the Su-35S provided minutes reminiscent of a suspense film. In this video, we will recount the story of the Russian shadow tanker Jaguar's appearance off the coast of Finland, Estonia's intervention efforts, the silent tension in the air between the Russian Su-35S and Polish MiG-29s, the growing concern in the Gulf of Finland, and ultimately, how the Jaguar retreated to the Goglands area east of the Baltic Sea. Camera footage of the incident, radio communications from the ship's crew, and coordination among NATO warships in the area will once again highlight how fragile the power balance in the Baltic is. The first scene shows the Jaguar tanker, part of the Russian Shadow Fleet, making an unauthorized entry into the Gulf of Finland. The Jaguar tanker is a vessel frequently seen in the Baltic Sea and North European waters, but its official records are unclear. According to some reports, the Jaguar tanker may have been added to the United Kingdom's sanctions list, or its owners may be on a blacklist. Navigating with missing signals, the vessel engaged in dangerous maneuvers as it approached the waters of countries like Finland and Estonia. On the day of the incident, it was noted that the Jaguar tanker had deviated from its planned international navigation route, instead taking a path near Finnish territorial waters, a move that could be considered unauthorized. Under normal circumstances, even if it had transit passage rights, the ship was required to identify itself, keep its AIS signal active, and coordinate with the relevant countries in the region. However, the Jaguar was proceeding through the Gulf of Finland along an unclear route, consistent with the nature of a shadow fleet. Estonian Coast Guard radars attempted to confirm the vessel's identity, but the name Jaguar was only verified through manual inquiry on the AIS system. The second scene, Estonia's intervention. The exact location of the Jaguar tanker, whether it had entered Finnish waters or approached Estonian waters, remained disputed. Some maps indicated that the tanker's route was proceeding through the middle of the Gulf of Finland. However, Estonian Coast Guard patrols detected that the vessel was performing suspicious maneuvers without authorization from Estonian authorities. This area encompassed a stretch of sea not far from the Estonian coast. Additionally, there were concerns that the Russian tanker might be violating customs laws or sanctions regulations in the Baltic Sea. In response, an Estonian Navy patrol vessel, a surveillance boat, and an additional helicopter were dispatched. The objective of all Estonian military forces was to first establish radio contact with the tanker, verify its identity, cargo, and route information, and, if necessary, board the vessel for inspection or to halt its progress. Estonia was obligated under EU sanctions to monitor vessels carrying Russian origin oil. Within the scope of this responsibility, the first intervention against the Russian Shadow Fleet tanker Jaguar came from Estonia. Estonian sailors repeatedly called the Jaguar crew via radio, saying, "Please stop, identify yourselves, and explain your course." At first, the ship's crew did not respond to these calls. In a brief radio communication, the tanker captain claimed that he was sailing in international waters and that the Estonian patrol vessel's intervention was unlawful. Video footage shows that the Estonian surveillance boat came within 800 feet, approximately 244 meters, of the tanker, significantly escalating the tension. The crew on board the Jaguar tanker stated, "The helicopters are greeting us like this and demanding that we drop anchor." Video footage showed the captain's radar screen on the Jaguar tanker. Subsequently, radio communications from the Estonian intervention team began to be heard. The Estonian sailor on the radio identified the vessel as the Estonian warship Papa 6732. The messages from the Estonian ship were quite clear. Your request will be denied. Follow my instructions. Change your course to 105 immediately. As the Estonian sailor said all this, the radar screen of the tanker named Jaguar displayed the course number 69. The Estonian Navy was now preparing to move to the next phase. The third scene, a Russian war jet. As the Estonians were preparing to board the ship, an unexpected development occurred. Russia suddenly sent a Su-35S fighter jet to the area. The appearance of a Su-35S in the Baltic Sea, intervening against Estonian ships targeting the Russian tanker, heightened the risk of a clash. Although the Su-35S cannot carry anti-ship missiles against ships, it could establish air superiority, forcing Estonian helicopters to retreat or threatening surveillance aircraft. Therefore, the arrival of the Su-35 fighter jet at the scene was interpreted as a warning to NATO or Estonian naval forces. Estonian officials reported in sources such as Novaya Gazeta that the Su-35S partially violated Estonian airspace. This was seen as a violation of international law, even if it was a quick flyby. An Estonian Defense Ministry spokesperson said, "Russia is again provoking us in our airspace. We have informed our allies." In response to this statement, Polish Air Force MiG-29s on patrol in the Baltic Air Policing mission were deployed. The fourth scene involves the incident being detected by Polish fighter jets and the MiG-29s, intervening against Russia's Su-35S fighter jets. The Baltic Air Policing mission is a mechanism that protects the airspace of Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia by rotating NATO member countries' fighter jets. From time to time, countries such as Poland, the Czech Republic, Germany, and France send F-16s, MiG-29s, or Eurofighter Typhoons to bases in the Baltic countries. This time, the mission was assigned to Polish MiG-29s. Upon receiving a warning that the Su-35S had violated Estonian airspace, the Polish Air Force scrambled two MiG-29s. According to radar detection, the Su-35S was flying eastward toward the Gulf of Finland. Polish pilots closely monitored the Russian fighter jet and attempted to deter it from the dangerous maneuver by locking onto it with radar. Although the situation did not escalate into a dogfight, tensions were high between the pilots of both sides. According to a report by the Daily Mail, at one point, a Polish pilot locked onto the Russian jet with radar, sending a warning signal. The Russian Su-35S likely maneuvered sharply to distance itself from the Polish MiG-29. Experts note that the exchange between the two jets nearly reached a tactical standoff point, but neither side fired. Nevertheless, these moments over the Baltic Sea carried the distinct aura of a Cold War standoff. In the seconds captured on video, it is claimed that the pilots' cockpit conversations were recorded. All of this paints a picture of a situation on the brink of war. The impact of the incident revealed that the crew of the Russian Jaguar tanker were just as afraid of NATO forces as the pilot of the Russian Su-35S fighter jet. According to reports by The Sun and Daily Mail, the crew of the Russian Jaguar tanker made panic-stricken statements on the ship's internal radio, such as, "What's happening? An Estonian boat is approaching. We shouldn't stop. What is the captain saying?" Some crew members commented, "There's a helicopter circling above us. There shouldn't be any sailors approaching the water. Don't let them board the ship." In the videos, the ship's captain can be heard identifying the NATO jet approaching the Russian Su-35 fighter jet as a MiG. In the following minutes, one of the Russian crew members excitedly points to a Russian drone in the sky, while the Su-35S is in the air, suggesting that it might provide escort. However, it was unclear whether the Su-35S and the drone could carry out a full operation to protect the ship. Flying alongside a tanker on the sea surface is risky and complex. What would have happened if the Polish MiG-29 fighter jets had not come to stop the Jaguar tanker and the Russian Su-35 fighter jet? The Estonians may have attempted to board the tanker's masts, but the Russian tanker maneuvered to prevent this. Wind and wave conditions at the site also made boarding the ship difficult. Meanwhile, as the Russian air presence increased with the arrival of the Su-35 in the area, the Estonian vessel may have decided to withdraw. A full-scale exchange of fire could have escalated NATO-Russia tensions. It was reported that NATO increased security measures to prevent the situation from escalating further. Experts noted that NATO warships were also directed toward the area in the hours following the incident. Swedish or Danish vessels may have monitored the situation from a distance. This multinational pressure prompted Russia to divert the Jaguar tanker to an escape route rather than continue to protect it. The Su-35S also withdrew the Jaguar Shadow Fleet tanker to avoid the risk of direct conflict with Polish MiG-29s. As a result, the tanker managed to reach a Russian port in the eastern Baltic Sea, reportedly near Gotland or the surrounding area. This location could be an island or port near Russia's Leningrad Oblast. There, the tanker entered safe waters. The Jaguar tanker's route, which created this crisis, can be seen as an incident that narrowly averted direct conflict between NATO and Russia. Fortunately, no weapons were fired, but air and naval assets performed tactical maneuvers at extremely close ranges. Experts believe that a wrong decision or accidental firing could have triggered everything. Countries such as Estonia, Poland, and Finland may view the dispatch of Su-35S fighters to rescue the tanker, which is on Russia's sanctions list, as a clearly hostile act. Russia, on the other hand, may respond by saying that it is merely protecting its ship and that Estonia's intervention is unlawful. While such mutual accusations have the potential to escalate diplomatic tensions, there is no immediate risk of all-out war. Experts interpret the incident as a sign of how much the EU and UK sanctions on Russian oil have been undermined. Russian Shadow Fleet ships are engaged in illegal oil trade by concealing the identity of tankers or changing flags. Newsweek reports say Putin is trying to keep his economy afloat with these ships. The Jaguar case raises the question of how far NATO patrols will go to stop this shadow traffic. In the coming period, as Western sanctions continue, the Russian Shadow Fleet may repeat such violations. NATO may respond with additional patrols. Estonia says it will not allow black trade in our waters, while Russia will say it has the right to protect its ships. While Poland continues to keep its MiG-29s on standby in the Baltic Air Policing mission, other NATO allies may also join similar patrols. In conclusion, the Gulf of Finland will remain a high-tension hotspot, with new surprises likely to emerge. This latest incident once again highlights how sensitive the waters of the Baltic and the Gulf of Finland are, and how NATO-Russia relations are at a level where they could flare up accidentally. The Jaguar tanker incident may have been just a small part of the bigger picture. However, even this piece serves as a reminder that the risk of conflict between Russia and NATO is real, and that the balance of power in the Baltic-Arctic region could shift at any moment. The panic-stricken moments recounted by the crew, the tension captured on video, and the silent diplomacy unfolding on the water's surface have led some to describe the Baltic Sea as a microcosm of global diplomacy. Even though it bears the name Jaguar, the reality is that when claws are bared, injury is inevitable for both sides. Therefore, it seems vital to develop mechanisms for controlled tension in such situations. Otherwise, a single misstep could be the last exit before the bridge. On the other hand, within NATO, it was not only Estonia and Poland that made such bold moves against Russia's Shadow Fleet, but also Germany. As you may recall, in March, Germany severely shook Russia's oil authority in the Baltic Sea, which it operated with its Shadow Fleet. A Russian Shadow Fleet ship carrying 100,000 tons of crude oil worth $43 million was captured in a successful operation by Germany. With this operation, the Germans saved this tanker belonging to Russia from being towed away. It was revealed that the rescued tanker belonged to the Shadow Fleet, one of Vladimir Putin's most important sources of income. Customs officials, the government, and various ministries discussed how to handle the loaded tanker and announced on March 14th that they had initiated legal confiscation proceedings. The tanker, named Eventin, was seized while carrying approximately 100,000 tons of crude oil worth over $43 million. The Eventin tanker, which was seized, gained international attention in January when German intervention authorities deployed multiple tugboats to rescue the ship that had run aground. It was reported that the ship had lost power and navigation and was drifting off the coast of Germany's Rügen Island. Authorities were concerned about potential oil leaks, which led to the ship being towed to Sassnitz. There, it was closely monitored around the clock by Coast Guard and federal police due to nearby risks. The Eventin had departed from Ust-Luga on January 7th, with its declared destination being the Suez Canal. 3 days later, the vessel was drifting in the Baltic Sea. An examination of its documents revealed that the vessel had been owned by the mysterious Lalia Shipping since May 2024 and had no known address. The vessel was being operated from Dubai. Reports linked the tanker to Fractal Marine DMCC, a Dubai-based tanker company involved in Russian trade. A few days later, it was reported that the ship's captain had applied for permission to leave Germany after the engine had been repaired. However, the ministry stated that it had detained the tanker and was examining its documents. The vessel was not merely a floating hull, but part of a larger operational network facilitating oil trade and potentially even military operations. The Shadow Fleet, which partially serves Russian interests, has been criticized for its alleged connection to damaging undersea infrastructure, such as internet cables and pipelines, further complicating the geopolitical landscape. The weight of these actions fell largely on German authorities, as discussions continued over the most effective method for responsibly pumping crude oil from the Eventin reservoirs. Meanwhile, the consequences of this seizure were not limited to a single ship and its cargo. Ongoing efforts to investigate shadow fleets signify a broader strategy aimed at deterring similar operations in the future. As government officials have noted, these stringent measures aim to send a clear message to Russia regarding its actions in the region. As discussions surrounding the fate of the Eventin continue, including the possibility of renaming the vessel, it is clear that the German government remains committed to supporting and expanding its maritime law and sanctions frameworks. The decisions taken are likely to continue to reverberate through diplomatic channels and influence both the political narrative and operational frameworks in the Baltic region. This incident serves as a reminder of the dramatic shifts occurring in the application of maritime law and international relations in response to the current geopolitical climate. The German government has been proactive in its approach as a critical player in international sanctions, while taking into account environmental and local interests in its actions. As we have seen, NATO's efforts against the Russian Shadow Fleet have continued unabated. These efforts to block the fleet are, of course, not only operational, but also diplomatic. The European Union recently approved a new package of sanctions against Russia. These sanctions target Russia's shadow fleet of oil tankers and warn that tougher measures will be taken if Moscow does not agree to a ceasefire with Ukraine. This package, the 17th imposed by the EU since Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, was prepared ahead of the latest ultimatum given to Moscow by European leaders in support of US-led peace efforts. Diplomats from the EU's 27 member states approved the measures at a meeting in Brussels, the bloc's Polish presidency said. The package is expected to be formally adopted in the coming days. Among the main elements is the blacklisting of around 200 oil tankers suspected of helping Russia circumvent restrictions on oil exports. The sanctions will also target companies in countries such as Vietnam and Serbia that are accused of supplying goods to the Russian military. In short, the West does not want to allow the Russian Shadow Fleet to operate in any strategic sea areas, especially the Baltic Sea. Estonia and Poland's intervention against Russia's Shadow Fleet tanker Jaguar, and a Russian Su-35 fighter jet escorting it, using their naval patrols and air forces, was recorded as NATO's latest concrete step against such activities. In the coming period, we may witness an increase in such effective measures by NATO against the Russian Shadow Fleet and the Russian Air Force serving it, particularly in the Baltic region. Indeed, the Baltic region has become the epicenter of tensions between Russia and NATO in recent times. Thank you for watching.